Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome back to the Injury Gurus, or welcome for the first time if you're just joining us. This is Matt. I'm Al. We got cameraman Mike. This is the channel where we talk about why injuries happen to pro athletes, how they happen, can they happen to you as a regular person, and then, of course, what do you do to prehab them, rehab them, and if there's any fantasy implications, we'll let you know about those as well. Today, we want to give you guys a quick recap of what happened last week, and then dive into an injury that you may not get as much information on regularly. First of all, weird time of the year for injuries. We're seeing a ton of just random injuries, what feels like random injuries pop up.
A lot of stuff just, feeling like they're popping up because they've been overused, they've been hidden from their teams for a long time. So what we're starting to see is a lot of guys get ruled out for one game here, one game there, trying to get a little bit of extra rest, especially with 6 weeks left in the season in both the NBA and NHL right now.
Yeah, so I mean, with the exception of like a Kreider who fractures his foot, or a
Muzzin
who breaks his hand on his shot, you're seeing a lot of upper body injury, lower body injury, and the one that's really, really big is Stamkos, the core injury. And they call it a core muscle surgery, and he leaves the game, but we get news now that he's been battling this all year. We hear the same thing with Riley, battling an injury all year. What does that even mean?
Which is also what they're kind of secretly talking about. Maybe Riley's been dealing with the exact same injury all season long.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, what does it mean to like battle an injury all year?
It's a very, I feel like it's a very NHL Canadian term of you're trying to work through injuries. You're trying to take as much rest as you can on off days. You're trying to get the right therapy when you can. And you don't want to have a surgery to fix the problem. And I use, fix in quotation marks there, because you don't, your team's in a battle, to use that word again, to make it into the playoffs with both the Leafs and the Lightning were for a very long time. With Stamkos, we're going to read the tea leaves a little bit here, right, with what we saw, right? And so actually we were all down at that Tampa game when he left the game. There wasn't much said immediately. The next day they came out and said, hey, he's been battling this injury. He's going to be out a couple days. 2 days later now, maybe it's 3 days, they've come out and said, hey, he's elected to have core surgery. He's out 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, we don't know any more information to that. They hadn't been talking about it all year. So again, we're going to read the tea leaves a little bit. What this means to me is he's gone in for a surgery to repair a sports hernia. A hernia is a tear in a muscle, specifically in the abdomen or the pelvic region, where you might actually have something which then kind of pushes through, okay? Now, a sports hernia isn't technically the same thing as a inguinal hernia, but they've just been called the same thing for so many years, we haven't gone back and changed the name. Okay, so a sports hernia is not a tear where there's something pushing through. It is a tear in the same region, though.
And so how does something like this happen?
This happens because the muscles that help us with rotation, specifically your internal and external obliques. So think of hockey players, right? The skating motion, right? It's all twisting. Your slap shot, your wrist shot, your pass, getting hit along the boards. Everything is either resisting or causing rotation. Those muscles, like any other muscle, when they're overused, what we get is slight micro tears. And at some point, like any other muscle we've talked about, guys with calf strains, with Achilles tears, at some point there is just too much damage to be repaired within a small period of time, and then we get an injury like this.
So I think this is really one where we can highlight this with some imagery and talking about it on Bill, because I think it's hard for people to conceptualize.
We're gonna make Mike do some work for us here on the camera.
Why don't we head over and
it's time for
Anatomy for Regular People, our favorite segment. Hey, Bill.
Hey, buddy.
Good to see you. All right, Matt, now that we're over here with Bill, let's just jump right into it and talk to me about the core in general first, and then zone in on Stamkos just to give the kind of breadth and then the specificity.
I think what most people think of as your core are your 6-pack, or if you're Al, your 8-pack muscles. So those are going to come down and they're going to attach down into the pelvis, okay? That's your 6-pack muscle, right? So that's why you see people in the gym doing crunches all the time. It's got its use, not so functional for an athlete like Stamkos. It's the other muscles, your external obliques, your internal obliques, your transverse abdominus, your multifidus, which is actually at your back. Those kind of make up the muscles that come up through here. So specifically for Stamkos,
they're like a cylinder, right? Is that kind of a good way to think about it?
We want to protect the spine like a cylinder, and these muscles all have a certain line of pull that keep it there. Okay. So the external oblique, which is area 1 where this injury tends to happen, comes off, and think of putting your hands in your pockets.
Okay.
That's the direction of those muscles. So they're going to come over here and they're going to attach down into the pelvis and what we call the linea alba, which is that midline. Okay. The posterior wall, which is the second point of injury, that's your transverse abdominis. So that's the one I always explain to people. It's kind of like a belt. Okay. As well as your internal oblique. So that is going to run perpendicular to your external obliques. If you remember, external obliques coming down this way, your internal obliques are therefore going to come up in this direction.
Interesting.
Here.
Okay.
Okay. All three of those muscles really imperative when we're talking about twisting motions, right? And driving power through that twisting motion through the spine. The third area that could be injured in a core injury or a sports hernia is actually your genitofemoral and your ilioinguinal ligament. Totally messed it up, your nerve. Okay, so those nerves can be entrapped within the muscle. I just get too excited around Bill. Those muscles can get entrapped due to tight fascia, tightness in the muscle, tears in the muscle.
Right.
So sometimes what they do is they'll go in either case, they're going to put little small cuts in there. We're going to put down basically a little bit of mesh to increase the area. Sew everything back up, and you're good to go in 6 to 8 weeks.
Gotcha. So again, this is just overuse, and I mean, how does one of those things get more overused than the other? You know what I mean? Like, it seems like...
I think that's the big question, which is why when they go in, by increasing the area at any of those spots, everything tends to get fixed.
Interesting. So can this injury happen again once that's fixed, or does it happen on the other side more often than not?
Very, very frequently we see high-level athletes who have this injury suffer from this injury continuously.
So they have to remesh that every time?
You hope that they've caught it earlier the second time around, that they've prepared their bodies a little bit better the next time around. But yeah, it's not uncommon to go in for the surgery more than once.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks for that informative, if not very confusing mouthful of words that you just gave us. Meet us over on the couch and we'll talk a little bit about the prehab and what this means for some of the fantasy stuff. See you over there. Thanks, Bill. All right. Welcome back. Another good session with Bill, man. He is so liberal with his body. How refreshing.
He must be European.
The biggest thing is, one, can this happen to regular people? Or is this something that is a very, pro athlete specific?
You know what? You see this a lot with younger athletes, especially in their kind of teenage years, when they're really trying to push to see if they can be pro athletes. This is something they see commonly. But you do see it in, the 20-something-year-old population of men and women who are still playing fairly competitively. But it is something that you have to do enough of that exercise to cause enough damage to create the tear.
And is this something that can be prevented or planned for prehabbing, or is
you definitely prehab for this exercise. Can you prevent it? To a certain extent, right? Again, we always talk about this, right? How strong does your core need to be? If you are an office worker who plays hockey twice a week, your core needs to be strong. If you're a power lifter, your core might need to be a little stronger. If you're a pro NHL player, your core has to be exponentially strong, right? That's why their off-season routine, nobody shows up to camp now 30 pounds overweight. They're showing up to camp in shape now, right? They are trying to do as much for their core to prevent, rotational injuries specifically in hockey, to get them through a long season. But as these guys get older, in 82 games and playing the playoffs, it starts to add up.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say. With 6 weeks left in the season, and we're seeing all these injuries. This Marc Gasol for the Raptors, that's an overuse injury.
Yep.
And then out again. But that's a lot from a long season into the playoffs, playing for Spain. So that begs the question of, does the season need to be shortened? Do we see load management become more prevalent as we get more and more into better athletes, pushing themselves harder?
I actually think soccer.
They stop doing tournaments, like World Championships. And is this a concern for the Olympics? All of these things are really, really interesting because we are seeing so many injuries, and because of technology, they're so much more prevalent. We're so much more aware of.
I think the playing field is so much more level now as well for these high-level athletes that there's no off days anymore, right? You're not, maybe I was going to say the Atlanta Hawks, but shit, they've been playing really well lately too, right? So there are no off days in the league, in either league anymore. So you've got to show up every day, and I think that's the biggest problem. And I think, leagues like the EPL, the Spanish league have been really good about this. The high-level teams who are playing in Champions League and, their country cups and in their league teams. the players are not expected to play every game, right? There's a rotation of players that go through. Now we're calling it load management since Kawhi came to Toronto, but realistically, this has been playing in Europe for a very long time. And I think at some point,
that's a good point. People don't talk about
I think at some point it's got to come over to North America, or we have to shorten the schedule up at least by 5 games. Give these guys a little bit more break. These guys really should not be playing more than 3 games in a week. One last thing. Stamkos, if you haven't done the math in your head, he's out for the season, right? Maybe coming back for the playoffs.
Well, they actually said at 8 weeks, if they don't make it past the first round, they're not bringing them back.
No,
right?
no,
I mean, that's a later round.
So we got guys like Muzzin out, right? He's a drop. Stamkos is a drop.
Yes.
Right? Those are something we forgot to mention.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I mean, those big injuries, those are season-ending. Kreider, Muzzin, Stamkos, absolutely, because those are big fantasy guys.
Yeah.
And fantasies are into your playoffs right now, so drop those. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for updating us. This is the channel where we talk about why injuries happen, how they happen to pro athletes in the NBA, NFL, and NHL. How do they rehab them? What are the fantasy implications? And of course, if these injuries can happen to you, how do you prevent them from happening? This is Matt, I'm Al, cameraman Mike, we're the Injury Gurus. We'll see you guys soon.